Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Eleanor and today I want to talk to you today about a book trilogy. This trilogy is called the Circle Trilogy and it's by the author Nora Roberts. It's these three books here. It's the Morrigan's Cross, Dance of Gods and Valley of Silence. Now this trilogy is a paranormal romance series. And this is a book series that I've now reread a few times. I've just recently finished as of yesterday, and that's probably my third or fourth reread since I first read this series probably about 9 years ago. My mum is a huge fan of Nora Roberts, and although I'm not a huge lover of reading romance myself, that's what she mostly reads is romance. And she recommended this series to me because it is, as I say, paranormal romance. It has a huge plot, it has very interesting characters, there's a driving plot, there's a purpose behind everything. And although at its core it is romance and all these characters do end up coupled up and that is the main focus, there's so much outside of that going on, which is what makes it very overall fun to read in my opinion, and I quite liked how well everything was woven together. As I said, I tend to only really enjoy romance when it's paired with a really interesting plot. And I really want a plot and a purpose other than the relationship, and I think this series does this very well. There's a serious storyline, an evil antagonist, an enemy, a war, but there's also the building of some really lovely relationships, and they are showcased very nicely. I like the characters, I liked how these relationships were formed. Obviously there's a lot of insta-love because why not? That's usually the case with romance. Books aren't usually long enough to depict a natural, slow-moving, like, romance. They have to be insta-love, but in this sense it feels like it works because it's part of the plot and because it's a magical, paranormal story. It feels like it fits. It doesn't feel too forced, and I feel like it works, and you don't worry about the pacing so much. It feels natural. I really like how she writes her characters, how they don't always get on in the beginning, and although it's a trilogy, we are technically following a different couple in each book. So the couple that you see at the end, it's been a slower build for them. So I think it's nice to have the difference in how these relationships form. But this series is also great because it's not just about romantic relationships. There's a sibling relationship in here, actually with twin brothers, and it's nice to see that relationship rekindled and grow again after a long separation apart. There's two cousins, and there's also some really good friends who actually become like comrades in arms during this war, and they become like family to each other. So it's nice to see all these other relationships develop as well. It just gives the story more context. It makes it fuller and more natural, I suppose. It's not just about these main characters. There's other things going on, and it's not as self-centered, I suppose. Each book furthers the plot of the story, but it also focuses, as I said, on a different pairing. And I liked how these relationships developed through the books. You focus on a different relationship technically in each book because there's from lots of different perspectives, but you also in the background see how these previous relationships that you watch develop are still evolving, and I think that's quite nice. It's not just like you see that in book one and you're done and you move on. All these characters are all together in the whole series, and that continues throughout. It just dips in and out about what the main focus of the book is, and it's quite nice to see these people to continue to develop their relationship and their connections with each other, and to see how all these feelings progress, especially as I've said, through this plot is quite dramatic, it's quite serious, there's a lot going on. It's nice to see how they all fit together as time goes on. In terms of the story, I really do enjoy this series. It's not just about the romance for me, as I've said, so it was really important that I actually liked the overall plot. I liked everything about it. So I'm glad in this case that I do actually really like the series, and I think you can tell by the fact I've read it multiple times. It holds a lot of nostalgia for me because I said I read it about 9 years ago, so I was probably about 13 or 14 when I first read it, and I hadn't really read much, if any, romance at all before then, and not much since, to be honest. It does hold a special place in my heart because I just really loved it. So the story, other than the relationships, is actually about magic and vampires, and it's a mix of different time periods. There's different worlds, there's some time travel and world travel, I suppose. All the central characters are interesting, and they have lots of different strengths and weaknesses, and it's nice to see all these strengths and weaknesses develop. I've said develop a million times already, I think. I need to think of a better word. Evolve over time. These people work on their strengths and their weaknesses. They have character flaws. These people aren't perfect. And it's nice to see that they're not infallible. They don't all get on immediately. And it's great to watch the progression of these relationships throughout. Not in terms of the romance, but just in terms of friends and family. It was really fun. I like how these characters interact. I just think Nora Roberts is just very good at writing people and making it seem quite realistic. Everyone's reactions and actions and how they said things fit with their character, and they were consistent, and I quite liked that you could feel that in it, that she put so much effort into maintaining all of these people. I also really liked that the main setting of the story is in Ireland. I'm from Scotland myself, so I always like to see books set in Britain that are a bit different, and I liked that this was set in Ireland in the countryside, and it involved a lot of like history. As I said, there's some time element in there, but I'm not going to say what that is because it's fun to find that out yourself. So it's nice to see how it fits in with Ireland's history and what they try to work with in that. And obviously, as I've said, it's about vampires, so you can tell that some people are very long-lived. So it's nice to see these flashes of history and hear the talk about things that they've had to happen in their life. I just thought that was quite nice how that she included that in. It just adds a different dynamic to the story and makes it deeper and just gives it more oomph. I don't know, it just adds more body to it, I suppose. I liked the way the magic was written in the story. I found it interesting. I liked how it was used. I liked, as I said, how it was quite natural. It's not like they've got magic and they see lots of spells and things. It was more natural and I suppose Wiccan. I don't know how to describe that, but like, you know, there's two different types of magic in this world and like the way they're used sort of thing. And yeah, it was very earthen and to do with a mother and a goddess and just very natural. It just seemed to flow and fit in with the feel of the story of this being set in Ireland and all the history. It slotted in nicely and it didn't seem out of place in this kind of modern world. I would, however, liked more focus on the magic. I would have liked to have seen more about that, learnt more about how it was done, and instead of just the surface level we get that's integral to the plot, it would have been nicer to delve deeper into that. But these books aren't very long. Each book is only about 350 pages, so they are actually quite short. So I suppose Nora Roberts was just picking and choosing what she focused on, and the magic wasn't delved into very deeply. In my opinion, I would have quite liked that, but that's because that's what I really like in a story, is a really interesting and complex magical system. I also liked the different facets of the villain. So this story had a main villain. It was the main protagonist throughout all the books, and it was the driving force for this big war, this big fight. And I liked the fact that through these books you found out more about this villain's history, you found out more about why she is the way she is and how she interacts with her subjects and orders them about. I think it's always really nice to have a bit of a viewpoint from the villain's perspective. It didn't make you empathise with her at all, really, in my opinion. It just helped give more context, and it was just interesting to see from their side what was going on with them and their camp and how they were dealing with the blows dealt with them by the heroes in this case. I just found it really interesting, and I liked the fact that you weren't meant to like her. She was a villain, and she stays a villain from start to end, and it's not a redemption story in any way. You're not supposed to sympathise with her. and I liked the way that that was worked into the story throughout, that you kind of knew from their perspective what was going on, and it didn't spoil it in any way to know what their plans were for this big final confrontation. I really would recommend this series to people who are interested in maybe trying a romance series, but are like me, who mostly read like science fiction and fantasy, or like young adult books. I don't really read contemporary at all. I don't enjoy contemporary, and I would never read a straight up romance. But I have now read a couple of series and a couple of books that have romance as a very heavy feature, but because they are, in this case, a paranormal story, or in other cases, magical or very fantastical, that I enjoy them because there is such a focus on plot and on character development and on other aspects other than the romance, so it gives it more context. So I really would recommend this series because it is a quick read, and I find Nora Roberts really easy to read. She's a really nice writer. She's obviously written a couple hundred books by now, I think, and this is the only series of hers that I've read, and I am really interested in seeing what other series of hers that are more fantasy based and seeing if I like them and giving them a go, because it is something I'm interested in. But as I said, I wouldn't like to read a straight up romance because I find that really boring in my opinion. Also, I think these books were published in 2010, I think, so they're quite old, but I don't find them dated at all, because mostly it's not, although it's set in the modern world, it is still paranormal and got a very heavy magical element to it, so I don't find it jarring with anything that seems out of time because it's dated a wee bit. I find it very readable. It's not like going back and reading a book from the early 2000s going, oh, they still have flip out phones and things like that. So yeah, I really would recommend this series. Let me know if you've read any Nora Roberts yourself, or if you've read this series, and if you've got any recommendations for me. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about reading romance in different genres. I think to each their own. It's just not something I enjoy reading, but let me know. And please be sure to like this video and leave a comment if you've got any questions, and I'll see you in the next video.